Welcome to Girlfriends Bible Study, a live Bible study with Connie and friends. Each week, Connie and her girlfriends engage in a lively conversation as they read and study scripture. So, grab a pen, your journal, and your best friend and enjoy this enlightening Bible study.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bible Study Live with Connie and friends. Tonight, we are talking about doing what's right even when you're scared. Even when you're scared. Doing what's right even when you're scared. And we're going to be reading a little bit from the book of Esther. It was a good example. There are several examples, honestly, in the Bible about doing what's right. It doesn't always talk about being scared. You think about Daniel in the lion's den. I'm sure he must have been afraid to be tossed in with the lions. Or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. I'm sure they must have been afraid to be in that fiery furnace, even though they sounded so bold as they said, we're still going to pray, we're still going to do what we do. Even if our God is able to save us, if you decide to throw us in there, but even if he does not, we're not going to bow down and serve your gods. Like, I love that. It's such a faith-filled statement. It sounds so strong, so faithful. And yet, they had to be scared. Think about Peter walking on the water when Jesus told him, come on. He said, if you're really Jesus, tell me to come to you. Jesus was like, come. And so Peter started walking. We know Peter was scared because it says that he starts looking around at the wind and the waves and gets scared. And the moment he basically takes his eyes off Jesus and looks at his circumstance, he starts to sink. So we knew Peter was scared. The story of Esther is really interesting, and I want to talk about not just Esther, but just in general, what it's like in modern day time to do what's right even when you're scared. What does that look like? What does it feel like? What kinds of examples are there? So I'm going to read a little bit of this chapter 4 in Esther. I'm going to read chapter 4, verses 9 through 16, and then I'll read a little bit in chapter 5. So chapter 4 is where we're starting. So, well, let me set up the story. So Esther's queen. She's become queen. Her uncle Mordecai is the one who had suggested that she go ahead and become a queen. And she wasn't really interested in doing that, but she did it because her uncle Mordecai told her to. And they're conflicting accounts. They say Mordecai is her uncle. Sometimes they say he's a cousin, whatever. Somehow he's a paternal figure in her life. And he had strongly suggested she, you know, basically go out. She was one of the young virgins in the land, so just go and try to be one of the king's wives, basically. And she did. He liked her, it said, more than any of his others. We won't get into the whole any of his others piece. That's not this message. That's not the message for tonight. But we will talk about Esther and what happened. So basically, there was a guy who worked for the king. His name was Haman. And Haman was arrogant. He was basically, if you think of like the West Wing or the White House, he was chief of staff. And so he had the king's ear. He was puffed up. When he went out, people respected him just like they respected the king, um, and except for Mordecai, who wasn't interested in bowing down to Haman. He knew Haman was just a puffed up blowfish, and he just was like, whatever, Haman. So Haman got mad and he decided he wanted to kill Mordecai, and not just Mordecai, but all of his people. Like he was so arrogant. It's not just I want to put a stop to this. It's that I want you and all your people to die. That's deep. That's real deep. So Mordecai found out. Well, here's the thing, because Haman was chief of staff, he could go to the king. He had his ear and he's like, you know what? There's this group of people, they don't respect you. They don't do this, they don't do that. I think we should just, get rid of them. And in fact, I'll put in basically $10,000 into the coffers for anybody who kills them. So I'll put some money in the kitty, basically what he says. Hold on, I'm going to let my sister in. There she is coming in. So he basically said, I'll put some money in the kitty. I want to contribute to the men who are going to go out there and kill the Jews. I'll put a 10,000 C note on it. So the king was like, you don't have to put any money in. Just go ahead and write up the decree and put my signature, my seal, my signet ring, just, put that on it. We'll be good. So he did. And Mordecai, of course, found out that there was coming a day that all the Jews were going to be slaughtered. And he started wailing. He dressed up in sackcloth and ashes, and he's wailing outside of the king's gates. And I mean, just wailing, wailing. And Esther hears about it. And, she's mortified. She's like, why is he out there acting up? What's wrong with him? Why is he doing this? So she sends one of her people to go find out what is wrong with Mordecai. Like, why is he doing this? And this is where we pick up in Esther chapter 4, verses 9 through 16. So, I love his name, Hathatch or Hathatch. I don't know which one it is, Hathatch or Hathatch, went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then, basically Mordecai says, you're the queen, go to the king and tell him not to kill our people. So this is what she does. She instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that he be put to death. That's it. If I go to him, I'm going to die. The only exception to this is for the king to extend the gold scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this. She's terrified. She knows it's the right thing to do, but she's terrified. And here's the response she sent back in verse 15 and 16. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. That's such a powerful statement. If I perish, I perish. She was terrified. They fasted, they did the thing, and on the third day, she went. She got up, she mustered up her strength, and she went. So, the beginning of chapter 5, here's what it says. Verse 1 says, on the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. She was saved. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you. Okay, let me stop there for a second. So she's already overcome one hurdle. She's terrified. She didn't want to do it, but she went ahead and did it. First, she fasted. She prayed. Her maids fasted and prayed. Mordecai and all the people of Susa fasted and prayed. You can imagine her heart for 72 hours. Those 3, she must have just been just trying to woosa, right? She gets out there and she's like, okay, I'm going to do it. And here's the moment. And if I die, I die. If I perish, I perish. She walks in front of the king. And there's a moment. In that split second, she doesn't know, is this going to be it? And you can imagine all the heads are first like, oh, what's she doing here? And then they look at him like, what you going to do? And she's just standing there waiting to see, is he going to hold out the scepter? And he does. Do you think, in your mind, would that be the end of the fear? Would that be it? Like, oh, he held out the scepter. Whoa, Lord, I'm so glad, King, I'm so glad you held out the scepter. Because here's what I wanted to ask you. You think it would have been that easy? Mm-mm. It wouldn't have been that easy. You can imagine that she was still terrified. She was still terrified. So, yes, he held out the scepter to her, and that's wonderful. Yes, she's in front of the king, and that's wonderful. She's excited that she's in front of the king and she's not dead. But now comes the big request, and she's got to be scared again. Here she is, faced with the first hurdle was, I have to go in front of him not knowing if I'm going to die. The second hurdle, being afraid and knowing she had to do what was right, even being scared, was I have to ask him to save my people. So what she decided to do, and I don't know if it was done in the moment or if it was already a plan, but she asked him to come to dinner. Let me just read that part so you can hear it from the word itself. It's chapter 5, verse 4 of Esther. She says, if it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Okay, let me stop there. She knows that Haman is the one who put the order out. She's asking the king, please come to my quarters and have dinner with me and bring the enemy of my people. You know her heart, if you could see it, it would be pounding, just coming out of her chest. The king says, bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asks. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, now what is your petition? It will be given you. He's already telling her, whatever you say, I'm going to say yes. But keep in mind, Haman is still sitting right there. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Esther replied, and again, her heart must have been pounding in her chest. She says, my petition and my request is this. And you can imagine the pregnant pause, the hard swallow. You can imagine. And then she says, if the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question. You know, she was terrified. She couldn't get it out. She knew she couldn't just say, never mind, because that's not going to work. I mean, you got the king there. You're going to have to say something. She decided to delay another day. Can you come tomorrow? Please. Then tomorrow I'm going to tell you what it is. I swear, if you just come one more night. You and Haman. Some stuff happened in between. Deals with Mordecai and Haman and his arrogance and how all that went down. But let's skip to chapter 7, where they come again. So you got to kind of end it in chapter 6, because what happened was, and it kind of sets it up, Haman and his arrogance, he was still so mad. He was puffed up, like the queen invited me. Like he's all puffed up. She invited me with the king. Like all of that. He's bragging about that. He's bragging about all that. And sure enough, yet again, Mordecai does not bow down to him. And he's furious. So he tells his wives and his boys, and they're like, you need to build a 75-foot gallows and hang him on it. That's what you should do. He's like, that's what I'm going to do. You're right. I'm going to do it. So they're building this gallows, right? And then he goes and he's standing outside. The king can't sleep. And for some reason, he's in his outer court right there. And the king is, which this is kind of cool. So, journals. They're journaling everything that happens with the king. And so when he can't sleep, he just says, just read me some stuff I done been through. And they start reading. And when they're reading, they read about this assassination attempt that Mordecai thwarted. And it says in there that Mordecai thwarted it. And he says, what do we do for that guy? Like, he saved my life. What do we do for him? And they're like, nothing, according to this. So he says, who's in the court? And they say, Haman's in the court. So I have to read this in 6 because it's just one of them things. In chapter 6, the king brings him in. And verse 6 says, when Haman entered, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? All of his arrogance. So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the streets, the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. I mean, he's so arrogant. He's convinced it's him. So he's laying it out. Just you do this, do that, and the other. So in verse 10 of chapter 6, go at once, the king commanded Haman, get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. Ooh, you know that stung. You know that stung. So here's the thing, and this is the only reason I wanted to read that, is because he has to do it, and he's out there yelling, here's what is done for the man the king delights. Now he's saying all the things, not happy, but had to do it, because he dug that hole for himself. But look, in verse 12, afterward Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief, and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. But here's the thing. While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. He didn't have a chance to make it right before he had to go to the banquet. Now it's time. Now he's there. And again, she's nervous, but this time she gets it out. So in chapter 7 of Esther, it says, so the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther, and as they were drinking wine on that second day, the king asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. He's trying to reassure her. She's still nervous, but she says, then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. Some would beg to differ, but I get it. I see where she's going with that. But King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, here's that point. The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman. She got it out. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. King got up in a rage. He's out there like, I don't even believe. I'm going to have to. And so Haman starts begging for his life, trips and falls on the couch where she's laying. The king thinks he's trying to molest her. It's a hot mess. Okay. Again, that's just, enemy footstool. That's that kind of stuff going on. And he got hanged on the gallows he built for Mordecai. It was messy. It was a big mess. But the point of this Bible study is doing what's right even when you're scared. And how does that play out in today's world? What does it look like to do what's right even when you're scared? When you're thinking, and if I perish, I perish. And what does perish look like for you? What does fear look like when you're afraid? What is that scared? What does that come from? And it can come from little things or big things. Being a whistleblower. I've been a whistleblower in an organization that was doing mismanagement. You don't know if you're going to lose your job. Ultimately, I did lose my job. But the choice was do what's right, even though I was scared. Or stay there and basically be complicit. Because when you stay and you don't say anything, you're complicit. That's the truth of the matter. Confronting someone to clear an offense. Sometimes it's scary. And sometimes it's not for, physical reasons. It's just sometimes humiliation, embarrassment, and you're feeling like this is going to be hard, but you know it's right, and you do it. Apologizing when you're wrong or when you can't keep your word. Those are scary things. Those are sometimes scary things. It doesn't feel good to do that. You have to get your nerve up to go and apologize and say, I can't keep my word, or I'm sorry for what I said. And I've had situations like that. I remember one time, and I tell this story often, when I worked for Oprah, there was a People magazine reporter. They were doing a cover story on fat people in the entertainment industry, and they wanted a picture of Oprah. And Oprah was no longer fat at that time. She had lost all this weight. And I was like, we don't want to be part of that. And she's like, well, you need to send us a photo. She got snippy. And when she got snippy, I got snippy. She said, well, you better send me a photo because she's going to be on the cover no matter what. And if you don't send me a photo, then I'm going to put the fattest, ugliest picture I can think of to put on I'm going to put that on the cover. And I said, and you will never get another quote, another story, or even your phone call returned from Harpo if you do that. Bam! And hung up. And then I was wearing my What Would Jesus Do bracelet. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, I did not handle that right. Because, this is never going to turn out right. Media against celebrities, it's not good. And I could have handled it differently. She was wrong, no question. She was way wrong. But I don't match her. I set my own standard as I'm supposed to. So I saw my bracelet when I was driving home. I went to put my hand on the steering wheel and there was my bracelet. And I was so convicted. And the next day, I went in and I had to do what was right, even though I was not looking forward to it. Scared is kind of a stretch, but I did know it might not go well. And I picked up the phone and I called her. And I don't even remember the child's name, to be honest with you. She was older than me at the time. I don't remember her name, but I just asked her to say her name was Joyce. And I said, Joyce, this is Connie St. John. She didn't say a word. And I knew she was still there. And I just said, I want to apologize for how I spoke to you yesterday. And I just told her, I'm a Christian. When I was going home, I saw my What Would Jesus Do bracelet, and I realized that Jesus would not have handled it that way. And I apologize for my words and my tone and for hanging up on you. And you could hear her take a breath. And then she said, I'm sorry too. I don't behave that way either. And I apologize. And I said, we would really prefer not to be included in this piece. But if you are insistent upon, and she said, she's the most famous woman in the world, certainly from our country, we're going to include her. And I said, okay, then I'll send you a photo. And she said, and we'll use the photo that you give us. Even if it's one where she's no longer heavy, we'll use the photo that you give us. And they did. They did. They used a pretty picture of Oprah, and the part of the article that talked about her talked about the weight loss that she'd experienced. That yes, she arose to fame. She rose to fame being heavy, but even under the spotlight that she was able to lose the weight. And it was hard, guys. It was hard. There are all kinds of reasons that we can be afraid. Retribution or retaliation. We can be afraid of death, like Esther was. Humiliation and embarrassment is almost always top of the list for people. Losing something, whether it's a job or a home or a car or a friendship or a love relationship, by having standards that you say, I can't do that, I won't do that, and you realize I might not be able to see him or date him or be with him if I tell him I can't go along with this behavior, or he tells a woman, it's not just female to male, it could be anything. Some people are afraid of doing the right thing because they might go to jail. I've never had to worry about that, but that's real. And right now it's real. And failure is often a reason that we hesitate to do the right thing. We know we're supposed to take that step. We know we're supposed to go to that place or make that call, and we're thinking, what if I fail? What if it doesn't work? What if I put myself out there and try this thing and it doesn't work and I fail? You know what? That could happen too. And then you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you try again. There are a lot of people who have failed and have turned it around. I think often about Vanessa Williams and the humiliation that she suffered after becoming the first Black Miss America, and that could have been it. And she decided, I'm not going to just sit there at that failure. I'll try again. Robert Downey Jr. and his, decline into drugs, and then he just said, that can't be my life. There are lots of reasons to pick yourself back up after you fail, but the fear of failure is not a reason to not try, not to do the right thing. Fear of failure is not, it is a reason. It shouldn't be the cause. It's a reason to be scared, but it shouldn't keep you from doing the right thing. None of these things should. Retribution or retaliation, even fear of death, if you have to save somebody or say a thing, humiliation and embarrassment, sometimes you need to just push through it. Recently, I had a situation where I had a perception about a person, and it was justified based on what I was told. And then we were on a call together, and he said something, and when he said it, I realized that doesn't sound like the person that I heard made these other comments about me. And in that instant, I sent him a private chat message and said, can we have a call? This thing was 2 years in the making, right? I'd held this animosity toward him for 2 years, believing that what he'd said about me was correct. And there was some truth to what he said wasn't correct, but what she said he did say. Some of it he really did say. But we had our call on Monday, and I just said I need to clear the air. And he was like, what's going on? And I was like, I need to clear the air. And I shared with him what had happened, what I'd been told, and how it made me feel about him. And that I realized that that may not have been fair or correct. But I wanted to make sure that I apologized for letting it go so long, and that I also gave him a chance to speak to what had been shared with me. And if he had really said it, I wanted a chance to address it. And some of it he admitted I did say, but I didn't know what you just told me now. I didn't The way you described this now, it wasn't described that way in the beginning. So yes, my initial reaction was this. And he admitted, but it wasn't for repeating. Well, we got to be careful what comes out of our mouths. Y'all know that too. There's that piece. Um, but he said to me before we got off the call, this was very noble and brave of you to call me or to set up a call with me to have this discussion. And I'm so glad that you gave me a chance to know what was said and to apologize. And I apologize for the words that I spoke because that wasn't fair. And he said, and I will say, I did offer to talk to you at the time. And I said, I didn't get that offer. I heard the conversation I could have was between me and her, not between me and you. And I was devastated by the judgment that was shared with me. And it was hard, you guys, but it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do to clear the air. And it's not always easy. Doing the right thing is not always easy, but it is always important. So I'm going to bring my sisters on screen. Hi, sisters. Hello, my Springle and my Gina. Do you have any comments that you would like to share? Oh, I can't hear you, honey. Are you plugged in? Where's your microphone? Oh, okay, do that.
But comments.
Okay, technical difficulty. We hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you should be able to hear me.
We hear you now.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. But I just said I was trying to think of, I'm sure I've had mostly work situations, some family situations where it was difficult conversations, and just pushed through and had them anyway. There's actually a difficult conversation I still need to have with a church member that I know I need to have. It's part of cleaning up my prayer closet.
Mm,
And yeah, and I just haven't had it yet. Because that person's been like pretty ill and stuff like that. But I when they're better, I want to have that conversation with them because it's been a many, many years. Yep. So that's it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't have anything else to add. It was a good study though.
Thank you.
Yeah, good message. I have a difficult conversation in my future as well. And sometimes they're harder with someone who you really care about,
Mhm.
um, you know, and who you want to maintain a really good relationship with. But then if you don't have it, then the good relationship is not really true. The foundation is not really strong. So, yeah, I have one of those in my future. I had one last week. Whew, that was rough. And now I have one coming up the next day or two as well.
It's not easy. They're not easy, but they're important for us to do. Sometimes we have to push through, and especially if it's right, if it'll save a life, if it will, keep you from being complicit. There are all kinds of reasons that we have to do what we do. Um, and and some we don't need to. Some we don't. Some God will show us, that's not your fight. You don't have to step in. And I remember my mom used to say somebody needed to tell him. I was like, Mom, it didn't have to be you though. Mom was always,
Always,
she needed to get told.
always, she was always the one. Always the one. If somebody needed to be told, it clearly needed to come from her because she didn't see anybody else doing it. So,
Exactly. And so, the praying about it is key too. Mordecai helped Esther know, now this is you. You were in a position for a time such as this. So suck it up, Buttercup. It's gonna be you. So anyway, thank you, ladies, for listening for tonight. And it I, it's not always easy, but I'm thankful for the times that I've been able to do the right thing. And I got an email from him the next day. What is it today? So that conversation was on Monday. I got an email from him yesterday, saying, thanking me for the conversation and asking me. He said, "You're so bold and you do what's right, and I'm wondering if you could consult with me for 30 minutes to help me be better about doing what's right." So
wow.
yeah,
That's awesome.
that's God, honestly.
It is.
So anyway, thank you, ladies, for participating tonight. Thank you for your comments.